Welcome to Longworth Hall. As Vicky said, we only moved in here recently, and it is, I'm sure you'll agree, a stunning space. A great place for a company that specialises in creating brand experiences through understanding how people shop, how they buy, and how they think about brands within the context of their life. A great place for us to be gathered here today. We started doing this thing called Best Global Brands around about 20 years ago. And I think Vicky's being slightly polite. I've actually been in the organisation for 20 years, which is something that I probably never believed would happen when I walked through the door. But we started doing it for a very, very simple reason, which was that we wanted companies to understand just how valuable their brands were. And the best way for us to actually prove that to them, particularly in the C-suite of organisations, was to put a value on them. Now, the process of valuation actually started a few years before that as a result of a hostile takeover. And someone asked us whether or not we might be able to ascertain whether or not the company who was selling the assets or was being bought was actually getting good money for what they were doing. But it gave us a platform upon which we could then start to explore the real business value of brands. We still encounter people virtually every day who don't really understand how valuable they are and think that brands belong to the fluffy bit of the organisation over there with the marketing guys. But I know that the people in this room will understand very clearly that brands are an essential part of business and an essential part of growth. And growth itself is a human construct. It's something that we learn to live with from our very, very earliest days. We grow physically, emotionally, intellectually throughout our lives. And if you look at businesses, and we do have, as Vicky said, a great spread from people who are going to be talking about how they started their business through to global leaders in this room. But the one thing that joins us all together, whether you're one guy sat in your garage trying to create that next new big startup, or whether you are running a global organization, growth is something which is on everybody's minds right now. Particularly given what's happening in the world. You have this little election coming up, I believe, in a couple of weeks, which has grabbed the attention of people all across the planet. And I'm actually being interviewed by CNBC tomorrow about it. And it reminds me of something that happened not so long ago in the UK when 51% of my fellow Brits decided that it would be a really good idea to leave Europe. You can probably tell by my tone of voice that I didn't necessarily agree with that 51%, and I was very much part of the 49%. But it is interesting how much things can change around us, not just politically, but technologically, and of course in terms of the way that we do business every day. Our customers are changing. They are growing in terms of what they expect from us as companies, as brands. And if you want to grow your business, you really need to closely understand your brand and how it works in conjunction with your business, because brands quite simply are the way that human beings actually interact with companies. And if you think about it, it's a very obvious thing to say. It's also extremely true. So what one of my friends would have called many years ago, or actually one of my bosses, said that's an insight, because it's something that you know to be true, but isn't necessarily pointed out to you on a very frequent basis. It doesn't matter whether you're a staff member, an employee, a supplier, a partner, an agency, a customer. The brand is the way that you relate to that company. Otherwise, it would be impossible to understand what a company is really all about, because they're legal constructs, they have products and services, they have finance, they have human resources, they have all of these different things that come together to mean what a company is all about. And yet, the way that we do it as human beings, because we've got other things to do in our lives, is that we boil it down to a simple understanding, so that when I say Lego to you, a whole bunch of things jump into your mind. You can probably imagine what it might be like to work there. It brings back memories of you as a child, perhaps. If I say Zara to you, you're probably thinking, oh, yeah, Saturday, let's go shopping. What am I going to wear for this, that? All of these things, they very, very quickly open up a whole world within our minds. Something which is very difficult to create something which is very difficult to manage over time, but something which is absolutely essential to the growth of your business. Put simply, your brand strategy and your business strategy are one in the same. One of the things that we say at Interbrand is that brands are simply business strategy brought to life. They're the way in which everybody from your customers to your people relate to you. To understand what you're about, what you're trying to do in the world, what you stand for, your values, and ultimately, of course, informing every single experience that you have. Be that a packaged product, be that walking into a space, be it a new product or service that you're using online. All of these things come together to help us form that image of that company. And they have to be managed very, very carefully. Because if you don't have a clear understanding of what your brand is, you know, the trite way of saying it is that you'll end up with a bland. It will not stand out. It will not mean anything differentiated. It will not create a sense of desire amongst people to either buy your products or work for you. You'll just be the same as everybody else. And that's a real challenge right now because the world is changing so fast. And our expectations, what we expect companies to deliver to us, are moving at an exponential rate, driven by many of the companies that you see on the pillars in here, who are re-educating and resetting our standards about how you should interact with businesses online, physically, how their products should be presented, how they should talk about themselves. In short, how they come to life. For those of you who like charts with simple ways of understanding how things fit together, this is not a bad one. It illustrates very clearly that you need to understand what you're doing with your business. We've got a great startup speaker talking to us later on, who I'm sure will have in his mind worked out a construct of how that company was going to come to life. But it starts with a business plan. How am I going to make money? Because if you can't make money, you're either a non-profit or you've got very, very unhappy shareholders. Then you need to understand and clearly articulate the strategy for your brand. How does this now come to life? How are people going to relate to me? What do I stand for? What are my values? And then ultimately, how do I come to life through my experience? And all those different areas where we touch brands, products and services, their culture, the communication, and then obviously physical spaces and environments. Simple really, isn't it? Well, yeah, it is if there's maybe you on your own in your garage. But when you've got tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people around the world, you have multitudes of different cultures, different people buying, different people working for you. That construct can make the difference between success and failure. So if you want it summed up, growth is quite simply an outcome of a very clear strategy and exceptional customer experiences. Easy to say, very hard to do. Which is why we're talking about the anatomy of growth today. This is the heading, if you like, that we used for Best Global Brands this year. Because when you look at these companies who are in that top 100, they have mastered that ability to be able to grow their businesses, and all the people on the pillars are some of the highest growing brands that we have on the list. Some of them growing at an incredible rate. Facebook, I'm going to have to just check. 48%. That's pretty stunning, really, isn't it? To almost half as much again of your value in the period of 1 year. Again, very easy to say, very difficult to do. So let's just take a quick look at some of the brands within the top 100. We do actually have the full list available for you. It's on interbrand.com. You're welcome to come along and take a look at it at your own leisure. But if you take a look at the top 10, Apple retains its #1 spot, Google #2, Coca-Cola #3, Microsoft, Toyota, the largest automotive brand in the world in terms of value, IBM. Not had the easiest year, but as the guys at CNBC asked me a couple of weeks ago when I was in New York, what's driving that? Well, I think we'd argue that they're in a process of transformation. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Watson, their artificial intelligence, and there was machine, and there were some fantastic articles on various different platforms over the weekend about artificial intelligence, something that everybody is talking about. Samsung, Amazon, Mercedes-Benz, and GE in at number 10. But it is worth pointing out, if you take a look there, for those of you who have got bionic eyes, maybe we'll all have them in about 20 years' time, $178 billion value for Apple. And just to get onto this table, you have to have a brand which is worth at least $4 billion. That's a brand, not your business, your brand. So it's quite significant value here. Number of new entrants coming into the market this year, or into our ranking. One of them's a bit of a weasel, I guess you could say. Many of you may be aware that HP took the decision a little while ago to split their business into Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and HP Inc. So those they've now been split on our table. Dior, one of the LVMH brands, coming onto Best Global Brands for the first time this year, and Tesla. And I'm sure I'm a bit of a car nut, self-confessed. I also do a lot of work in the automotive category. And the changes that are going on in that world are quite remarkable. And we'd say that this is definitely a brand to watch because they are definitely trying to change the way we think about travel. So who's growing fastest? Well, for those of you who've walked up and down the hall, you already know the answer. Facebook, 48% growth. Amazon, 33%. These two brands have had a history over the last 5 years of growing at an exponential rate as they continue to capture more of our hearts and minds and, of course, our wallets. And indeed, we've actually highlighted any brand, and I think there's 30 brands out of the top 100 who've grown at more than double digit, which is remarkable, considering everything you read in the newspapers, see online, hear on TV, whatever it may be, about the challenges in the world today of doing business. So let's take a moment to really take a deep look into the anatomy of growth. Now, obviously, Vicky's only given me around about 15, 20 minutes, so I can't go right into the depth of it. But just to pick out some of the key factors that make the difference, I guess, between those who are growing and those who aren't. First and foremost, I think it's worth saying that growth is highly complex for any organization. I don't know if many of you have ever started up a company. That process of actually growing from one person to two feels like you're climbing Everest. And then for a big organization, adding 5% to your top line is a Herculean effort. It's complex. And the main reason it's complex, of course, is because businesses are full of people. And people, when they're aligned, can be incredibly powerful in what they can do. But when they're not aligned, can be extremely difficult to get to do anything positive in an organization. And I'm sure the audience today have never worked within a company where one department within a company might not necessarily be working to the, shall we say, the best outcome for one of the other departments. I'm sure you've never experienced that. You know, those guys over in product development, they just don't understand what's going on in the world of marketing. Never heard that before or anything like that. It's a challenge that we face every single day. And it's something that brands are very, very good at helping people to sort out. It's interesting that we would say even that the role of the chief marketing officer nowadays is increasingly becoming that of the chief integration officer, as the person who generally tends to understand the role of the customer within the organization and indeed the demands and expectations of the customer, being able to bring together an organization so that there is a clear line of sight as to what you're trying to do is a real challenge for people every single day. Growth is hard because you know what? The world doesn't stand still. You come up with something great, and then all of a sudden, your damn competitors come up with something almost identical or better. And this goes on every single day. Growth is hard, and it's multi-dimensional. There's an internal and an external dimension to this. If you look north to south, on the inside of your organization, your culture is a primary driver of success. I'm sure you've all heard that wonderful saying from Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Your culture is absolutely key to success and growth. And then you need not only a great culture, but some people who've got strong capabilities as well. You've got to have the skills and the capabilities to be able to move forward. One of the fastest growing areas of our business is actually helping companies to realign themselves inside in terms of their capabilities, their skills, their ability to share knowledge, to work together and integrate. And then you've got the external dimension as well, which is the world inhabited by customers, their expectations in terms of your products and what they will deliver and how well they stack up against your competition. And of course, the experience you provide. I'm sure, again, doesn't happen in America, but in the UK, every now and then you might just ring up a company and you'll speak to the customer service people, but they seem to have absolutely no idea or connection to what's going on in the store. I'm sure you never experience that, but some companies really don't deliver a good experience. And this is something that we as customers, if we take all these lanyards and suits and everything else off, we expect this as much as anybody else, the people that we're serving every single day. So brands do grow businesses, and businesses grow brands. It is a cycle. As I said, effectively, your brand strategy is simply your business strategy brought to life. It's there to serve the business. And in order to do that really well, there's three things we would say that you need to be very, very good at. I remember probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we were just intrigued about the budgets that companies spend on their tangible assets versus their intangible assets. So a brand is an intangible asset. You can't really touch it, right? This is a tangible asset. You can touch it. On average, companies spend 13 times more revaluing their fixed assets every year than they spend on understanding their intangibles. And yet, you take a look at the value of some of those intangible brands, $178 billion of brand value and strength, if you like, for Apple. If you do not understand that in forensic detail, how can you possibly make it work to your best possible advantage? You really need to understand the interaction of all the different things that make your brand strong against your competition. Vicky mentioned things like authenticity and consistency, but on the inside, things like degree of clarity, the degree to which people understand what you're trying to do as a brand within the marketplace, your commitment of your staff, your ability to respond to market change. These are all key drivers of brand strength and ultimately growth. So you need to understand those things in incredible detail. And we build models for companies around the world who literally uses everything from sales data to customer satisfaction data to internal pride data about employees to help understand how well those things are being managed. Now, if you understand those things, it's very easy then to be very precise in terms of where you need to create change. Where can I actually get one over my competition? Which takes you to the next important factor, which is creativity. As human beings, we've always been attracted to the next shiny thing. We love things which entertain us, inform us, make us laugh, cry, feel sad, feel hopeful for the future. Effectively, creativity at play within your organization. If you have a very powerful understanding of what you're trying to do, one of my great friends who's creative director said to me, I like nothing better than the freedom of a tight brief. The tighter the brief, the clearer the understanding, the better the creativity. But that's not enough in its own either. You also need to be able to sustain that over time. The ability to install and institutionalize capabilities within your business, if you like. The ability to get your marketing team to deliver effectively, consistently around the world, to share knowledge, to be able to put in place best practices, and over time, to sustain the effort that you need to really build a brand. And that's all I'm going to go into. If you want to hear more, you'll have to come and talk to us. Just a moment about the methodology and how we do it, because I know, well, I personally really looking forward to seeing the speakers today. We've got some amazing people joining us. And I'll be back in about half an hour after Peter's spoken to take some questions, so you can ask me anything you like. But this is how we do it. It's a very simple process. Again, when you put it on a chart, it's simple. It requires a lot of effort to actually do it. We start by understanding your earnings stream. Where do you earn money? Where do you make profit, if you like, to make it simple? And then we're trying to understand what proportion of that profit is actually due to your brand. And that's the second thing, which is called role of brand. Literally, when you go and buy a Porsche, which is down there, what proportion of that purchase is actually to do with the brand? Now, for a brand like Porsche, it's probably 70% plus. For those of you who own Porsches in the room, I know you're going to be saying, no, 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 I bought it because it's an amazing piece of engineering. But we all know different. If you're buying gas to put in it, 15% if you're lucky. Very, very small part of the decision. Think about your own behavior. There's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 brands of gas station that you'll happily drive into and fill up with. So that's role of brand. And then the third part is what we call brand strength, which is those 10 factors that we alluded to earlier on. Looking at the inside of the organization, because great brands start from within, and the outside market. How well do you present yourself in the context of your competition? So that's how we do it. That then draws together as a brand value. There's a guy in here called Sean Mead. If you really want to get into the depths of this, Sean works with me and a couple of other people to actually do this, so he can tell you the most incredible degree of detail about it. And this is the ranking for this year. Anyone who makes it onto here is by nature global, because we don't call it best global brands just for fun. There is a criteria about where you actually sell product and where you are present as the same brand. If there's anybody from Walmart in the room, I don't know if there is, but about once every other year I get a call and say, why aren't we on the list? And I say, well, you're certainly big enough, but you're called different things in different markets. So they're not a truly global brand. And there we go, the top 100. So first and foremost, if there's anybody in here from any of the companies on here, I salute you, because it's an amazing thing to be on this ranking. And as I said, the main reason we do it is very, very simply to help companies understand how valuable their brands are and therefore how important they are to business. Please do have an amazing day. Feel free to talk to any of the Interbrand team in the room. If there's anything that you want to know, we're here to help. Enjoy, and thank you very much for welcoming me this morning.